Okay, so the idea with indexing, remember, Google doesn't want to have to search through its entire database of web pages in order to bring you some results. It wants to be able to say, here are the words people entered. I see that I have a long list of pages that contain the first word. I have another long list of pages that contain the second word. Another long list of pages that contain, say, the third word. I complete the intersection of those three pages. I find, here's a small subset of pages that have, these words. That's what Google would typically send you. As we know now, Google isn't always bound by that, right? Sometimes it can return search results where one of the search terms is not actually present. But still, that's the basic idea. Google, instead of searching its whole repository of web pages, uses indexes to find what it's looking for very quickly. That's all that slide is. Okay. Now, on top of that, this is where the first slide that's totally new. Google has something called a knowledge graph. So what Google really wants to do is return results that match the intent of what the user is searching for, which may or may not be exact text matches. And it's driven by something called natural language processing, which basically just means trying to get the computers to respond to humans acting like humans normally do. Short version, looks for the meaning of search term groups and matches them to the meaning of web page content, right? So, for example, what shall we do? What shall we do here? Let's say what we want to do is have terms as complete semantic units. Okay, so instead of just looking at exact text matches, Google wants to return pages with matching semantics, right? For example, if I'm looking for the terms Cubs, World, Series, 2015, that's a specific thing, right? Everybody kind of remembers that there was a few years ago they had a good run and they did all that. This is a specific thing, okay? This is a specific thing. Can be indexed as a unit if popular, right? And over the last couple years, especially in the Chicago area, this is probably a pretty popular search, right? Something along those lines. Now, roughly equivalent terms, right? Cubs, World Series, Championship, 2015, or recent Cubs World Series, right? Because maybe you don't remember the year. Things like that, okay? These are all basically going to point to the same thing, right? They represent the same concept, but expressed in different ways. And Google's indexing system now is smart enough to recognize that. I mean, they may return slightly different page sets, but, it's going to all point in the same direction. Okay, so that's what Google wants to do. Rather than get hung up on the little details of, do these words perfectly correlate? Google wants to recognize, in particular, that World Series is a thing, right? World Series, the baseball championship, and Cubs, World Series 2015, refers to a specific, event in one of the World Series, right? So World Series in particular is a semantic unit. Now, it may not do the full, stretch on all these, but that's what it's trying to do. Likewise, if somebody looks up Chicago Cubs World Series, Google isn't going to treat these as completely independent, separate phrases. They're going to say, World Series, that's a concept, that's a specific thing. Chicago Cubs, that's a specific thing. It's not two unrelated words, Chicago and Cubs. Chicago Cubs by itself, right? Those two words together represent a specific thing. That's the sort of semantic indexing that Google's getting at these days. Okay. If you want some more detail, right, there's a couple links there, but that's enough to get by on. Okay. The other thing is retrieval. So we've covered crawling, grabbing the web pages. We've briefly covered indexing, how Google stores the pages in order to get them later. But the actual retrieval process, we can talk about that. So, first of all, suppose some search query arrives, right? Somebody's looking for something. Well, Google has to look at those terms in its index. So what it's basically going to do, suppose a search comes in for Chicago Cubs World Series 2015. Okay? How's Google going to process that? Well, first, extract any semantic units from the search phrase. Okay, and what Google is going to do is basically say, oh, Chicago Cubs. That's probably a specific thing. World Series. That's a specific thing. 2015. Right, that's a thing. It might even say, depending on how advanced their indexing is, it might even say World Series 2015 is a specific thing. Okay? We don't have access to all of how Google processes these, but let's say hypothetically that's what it's going with. Okay? Then second, look up pages from the index for those two entries. Okay? And that's easily done because they're already pre-indexed. Google says, here's the index entry for Chicago Cubs. Here's the index entry for World Series. That's where I find all the pages. The tricky part is this. Third, rank those pages. Oh man, that is a complicated thing because Google doesn't want to just store the rankings most of the time. Unless it's a very popular search, then maybe. It's a very, very popular search where the background data doesn't change. Okay? It has, in some sense, has to rank those pages, okay, and only return the top few hundred. Okay, so I'll give you, in case you didn't know, I don't know how much attention people pay to these things. So if let's actually Google it up. Chicago Cubs World Series 2015. Okay, boom. Here we have some search results, right? And you'll notice up at the top, about 11.5 million results. How many do you think we actually get? Well, I already gave it away. We get a few hundred, right? This just shows how many entries Google has, how many pages it has stored for that. It doesn't actually deliver all of them. In fact, if you go all the way to the bottom, go to the 10th page of results, and go a little past that, we get to the 14th page. This is probably about it. Yeah. So in fact, they only show 129 results, okay? That's all that we get. Why? Google doesn't want to spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of electricity sending you millions and millions of pages when its algorithm is good enough that what you're looking for is almost certainly in that top 100. All right, so they have to rank them in some sense, and they have to send you the best ones. We'll talk about that in the indexing retrieval lecture, but that's the idea. It's simple steps. Look at the search phrase, break it up into index entry terms, pull those pages, rank those pages. All right. And it gives you back the results. Okay, now we don't have a whole lot of detail about the ranking process because one thing, it changes every now and then, and there are many, many factors, and the weights on them could be potentially shifting, but basically the ranking algorithm is part of Google's special sauce, right? It's one of their trade secrets they don't want to give away. But general principles, like we've talked before, where the terms appear, where they appear in the page, if they're in headers or in the title or ordinary text. As far as terms grouped together, if Chicago Cubs is a semantic unit, it's going to return a lot higher if Google finds a page with the Chicago Cubs on it, as opposed to Chicago and Cubs widely separated on the page. And of course, different ways that the text appear, either if it's in ordinary text or object metadata, for example. Okay. So, how the prioritization works, very, very simple question, right? We know that Google gets a whole bunch of pages. Chicago Cubs World Series 2015 gave us like 11.5 million pages. Well, how should they be ordered? So, way back when, right, flashback to 1998 or so, It was basically about frequency, prominence, co-location. It was a pretty simple thing. Did the pages have the terms? How many times did they have the terms? How prominently were they displayed? Were they grouped together? It's a simple text analysis, okay? So the idea, the logic behind that is if there was a page saturated with a topic, like you had some long article about the Cubs World Series run, that would be a better match than, you know, a general purpose article about baseball that say happened to list all the World Series things, and somewhere in there said World Series 2015, you know, Cubs versus Mets, right? The long article about the Chicago Cubs run would probably be a better match than the, you know, little mention. Also the page rank factor, right? We talked about that. So if you had pages with more links on it or sites with more pages, that would tend to boost up those results too. But as we know, this model is easily subverted. It's easily twisted. People can game it. People can pack pages with content that, you know, will draw in people without actually making the page content better. So, Google's response to that, things not strings, okay? A string, in most programming languages, basically means some slug of text, right? There's various ways that that's expressed. But what we mean here is Google isn't looking at exact text matches anymore. It's trying to recognize what things that text represents, right? That's the basic of this semantic search. When Google says Chicago Cubs is a semantic unit, it's not just looking for the words Chicago and Cubs. It's trying to recognize pages that are somehow about the Chicago Cubs as a baseball team, okay? And to do that, Google's trying to mimic how humans search. For example, shoe, right? If you're saying shoe is part of a retail site, if you see an image, if you see a price, if you see a drop-down menu for different sizes or colors or styles, whatever, right? Those are all things that bundle together somebody looking for shoes to buy. Okay. Now, we know this too, right? Google has some kind of adaptive mechanism for recognizing how relevant pages are to search terms. So, sometimes it's inherent, right? For example, if you do a search weather for this zip code, right, downtown whatever, if you do a search for it, you're going to get today's weather by default. Google says, well, people that are searching for weather, they're probably searching for today's weather. Right, so if I do weather 60601, I get today's weather. How about that? Right? Because most people searching for weather are searching for the near-term forecast, and Google has simply observed that. But there's other options, right? Hourly, monthly weather, other sites, whatever. If you wanted historical weather, for example, you'd have to say weather, and I would do July 14th, whatever. And I could get some, you know, historical weather stuff if I include that. But just by default, I haven't put anything in that says I want today's weather, but Google knows through experience, people searching for weather want today's weather. Likewise. Okay? Stock price PFE, Pfizer. If, you know, people are looking for a stock price quote, chances are they're looking for the current price, not historical results. Also, sometimes topics can have a very rapid change in focus, right? So in 2016, Harvey Weinstein was a famous and fairly well-regarded movie maker, right? A year later, not so much, right? Searches for Harvey Weinstein would turn up a lot of articles about his misbehavior over the years. So, very different results at that point. So Google, you know, says, oh, this is the way that's going. And of course, local variations. For example, you search Kardashians. Suppose the Kardashians are doing some demo in, you know, some promo in Chicago where they're selling stuff. If you're in Chicago and you search for Kardashians, Google's probably going to give you stuff about their local appearance. If you're anywhere else in the world, probably not, because unless you're in Chicago, you're probably not interested in that. Anyway, so Google combines a whole bunch of different models, right? Historical data, like long-run average of the world historical data, and some predictive models based on where people are, right? Geographic co-location, or based on your own personal history, it tries to recognize, oh, here's the kind of pages you'd be interested in. All right. Now, user history. One of the things that Google's put in the last 10 years or so is factoring recent searches into results, right? So if you guys have ever done the what, sometimes you get stuff that's not really safe for work, but we'll see what happens. Even if it's not really safe for work, it's kind of funny. What is the weather? What is the weather today? What is Prime Day? What is my IP? That's always a popular one. It's like always top 10. What's a grease trap? I don't know why that's weird. All right. I do know what a grease trap is, but I don't know why it's there. Or we can do why. Why is my poop green? Well, too many Shamrock Shakes, that's why. Actually, those blue raspberry drinks will do it too. When you have small children, they're fascinated by multicolored poop. So we hear a lot about that. Okay. Anyway, so you do what, right? And you might see what time is it as an option. That's a popular one. But suppose I do this. Suppose I give Google some context. I type, suppose I want to learn about Ethernet. So I type in a search, how does Ethernet work? And there's some articles there, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I say, yeah, okay. And I say, what is? And Ethernet appears right at the top. A whole bunch of Ethernet stuff. Because Google knows if you're looking for this, your next step is more than likely, one of these things. You want to learn about routing generally, or you want to learn about Ethernet or cables, whatever. Okay. And then what is Prime Day? I don't know. Does anybody not know what Prime Day is? We can talk about that. All right. Okay. So again, the algorithm is complex. It is secret. You are not going to get it in this class. You're not going to get it unless you've been working at Google for a while. Well, we know some things. Number one, supported by search history. We can empirically verify that that works. We can do some searches and then some follow-up searches. We see that it's correlated. And certainly supported by actual clicks, right? So if you click on something, especially if I do a search like what is Ethernet, and then I follow back with something like what is an Ethernet cable, for example, and I click on a link for that, Google says, you're really interested in that. So that's going to boost up the ranking of that follow-up search. And they incorporate individual and global preferences. So globally, right, Google considers the whole universe of people who have searched for what is Ethernet and then follow-up searches. But it also looks at your individual stuff. So it's a complex mix in there. Okay. Last thing, Google Instant. Okay? And that's basically where Google suggests ways to complete terms, right? We've already seen this, but this is specifically what that technology is. So if you do a simple phrase like what is, who is, why does, okay, you'll get that. And of course they change over time. So let's do who is today. Who is, that's strange. All right. I was not expecting any of those things to show up. Ted Bundy, by the way, is a famous serial killer. I believe they put him in the chair during the end, around the end when I was in high school. I'm very surprised. He must have a movie coming up or something. I'm surprised that he's in there. Anyway, okay. So, you can see this, right? Now, some of these are persistently popular. Like I said, what is my IP? That's been one of the very popular ones for as long as I've been paying attention to this. Other ones, they're there for a few days and then they're gone, right? So sometimes in the semester I'll do this around a holiday and I could say, I could find, what is Easter, for example, or what is St. Patrick's Day, or who is St. Patrick? I think in the spring I did this around St. Patrick's Day and it was there, who is St. Patrick was like the top one. Anyway, well, how it works, basically simple statistics, right? Google just looks at popular term combinations, popular searches. However, there is some filtering against defamatory and not safe for work results. For example, this article here, excuse me, how autocomplete works. I don't know, and it's from 2016. I don't know if you're aware, but there was some stuff going on with Hillary Clinton and her emails, and it became an issue during the election. Anyway, there were some people who got upset about this because some people on the right, they said Hillary Clinton investigate. It doesn't autocomplete that, right? So Hillary Clinton, there's all kinds of stuff. Investigation, nothing, right? And a bunch of people on the right said, hey, look at this. Google's, on Hillary Clinton's side. She's blah, 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 blah. Well, as it happens, anything that's, reasonably, Google is just covering its own ass. So if I do something like Donald Trump, what can I do lately? What was the 2016? Oh, yeah. Who was that girl? Stormy Daniels. Right? But I don't have to explain who Stormy Daniels is. I mean, obviously that should be coming up, right? But it doesn't. So anyway, yeah, Google just doesn't want to get sued. And it kind of does that for everybody. Just saying. Okay. And again, you can empirically verify this for any particular celebrity scandal of the week. Okay. So that's it. That's the end of this.